Hello everyone, my name is Yue. Today I'm going to present a paper, Factors Influencing Engagement in Hybrid Virtual and Augmented Reality. This paper is co-authored by Professor Eugene Chen and Dr. Cobb. Our paper was submitted to ACM Transactions on Computer-Human Interaction in 2021, where the work was actually conducted in 2020, which is 4 years ago. So we're happy to present it here in CHI this year. The motivation of our work is that when we were conducting research about virtual museums using VR and AR technology, we found that both technologies were closely centered around virtual objects. So for AR, the 3D models of museum objects were augmented on an image target or a tangible gadget. For virtual environments, we put 3D models of museum artifacts in the environment and design interactions based on that. So why don't we combine these two technologies and allow users to freely choose what kind of device they want to use and at which point of the reality-virtuality continuum they want to stay, and possibly connect with their families and friends in different points. So looking into the experience aspect of VR and AR, engagement and presence stand out to be two important ones. And engagement was found to be often considered as a component of presence, and presence include both media and user characteristics. It indicates more than the illusion of being there, but also users' perceived realness of a mediated or virtual experience. We look at previous ways evaluating engagement presence in VR and AR. There are researchers who compared VR and AR separately in previous work, and they found spatial presence and ecological validity were higher in the real environment, whereas engagement and negative effects such as disorientation, tiredness, eye strain, and nausea were greater in the virtual environment. And when we looked into the factors that might affect engagement around virtual objects, we found three prominent ones: object interactivity, user-generated content, and avatar proximity. And we also looked into the experimental methods for measuring engagement and presence. And these include subjective measures using self-reported questionnaires and also objective measures using psychophysiological metrics such as EEG and also user activity monitoring. Therefore, we present our research question and hypothesis based on the review of related works. What are the factors influencing user engagement in hybrid VR and AR environments? We test 4 hypotheses in our study about presence, interactivity, UGC, and avatar proximity. We designed a virtual museum environment with 7 objects in it, and the same 7 objects were populated in an AR environment with the exact same layout so that we can obtain a valid comparison of these two different technologies and environments. So here is the demo showing you the design of the environment. So as you can see, we implemented different object interactivity in the experimental environment. So the figure on the left is a bronze music instrument. Before we conduct this study, the same object has been used for other experiments, and at that time, participants expressed the expectation of listening to the sound of the instrument. And similarly, for the object on the right-hand side, which is a pottery unicorn, and based on its description, this is a symbol of justice, and the horn is used for punishing the bad guys. So we implement a gamified interaction to see how the horn can be used to attack a menacing base. So these are the two objects of a high object interactivity, whereas the medium ones were implemented for objects of a reasonable size to be grabbed in hand, and for the low object interactivity, they were put as if they were in the real museum environment, that being static on the wall or static on the pedestal or even on the floor, because it is too big to be holding hand. For the second vector, user-generated content, these contents were also elicited from our previous study, where participants express their personal interpretations and provide comments when they were viewing these museum artifacts. So we compiled them into a label showing different lines of comments along with the information label, so that these content, the UGC labels, were only displayed on the UGC condition, whereas for the non-UGC condition, only the information label is presented to the participants. For the third factor, avatar proximity, we use user activity monitoring to record the real-time position, the XYZs, of the user's avatars, so that we can calculate its distance with the museum objects and also with other avatars in the virtual environment. We adopted different measures, including a questionnaire measure for engagement and presence, respectively. And second, we adopt a mobile EEG measure, where we can calculate the engagement, arousal, and valence index based on the alpha, beta, theta waves recorded in the Muse headband. And for the user activity monitoring, we wrote a C# script embedded in Unity to record the real-time position, the direction of the gaze indicated by the head position, and also controller interactions, and we can calculate the relative distance of virtual avatars and objects based on the Euclidean distance. The entire experiment took about an hour in total, where participants were first briefed about the purpose of the study, provide their consent about their background information, and they conducted 2 tutorials, one for VR and the other for AR, respectively. The experiments include 2 sessions, one with information label only, and the other one with both information label and UGC label. For both sessions, participants conduct the experiment together with 2 users, where they were instructed to freely explore the environment, interact with the artifacts, and talk to each other about the aspects that they were interested in. And for the interview and debriefing, we conclude the study and thank the participants. So in total, we recruited 60 participants, 13 males and 47 females. They were aged between 18 to 51. Most of them have experience with 3D images. About half of them have used VR, and about half of them have used AR. The result shows that for presence, participants perceived greater presence in VR compared to AR. And for the engagement scale, participants also reported greater engagement in VR than AR. For object interactivity, we examined the data collected from the EEG and user activity monitoring and mapped them using the timestamp. And we found that participants spent a relatively longer time around objects of high interactivity compared to the medium and low ones. And similarly, their total engagement index were higher with high object interactivity than medium and low ones. However, the real-time engagement index showed the opposite result, where it was higher for low object interactivity, followed by medium and high. And this is because different user interactions allowed with the different object interactivity, which we will discuss later. And for the UGC hypothesis, we compared the two conditions with and without the UGC label and found that participants had a greater engagement for the UGC condition than the information label only condition. And when we extract the data about reading labels only, we found that participants were more engaged reading the comments labels than reading the information labels. Regarding the avatar proximity, we visualized participants' real-time positions using a heat map and did a cluster analysis about their distance and their engagement. We found that participants had the greatest engagement when they were around the distance of 3.36, which is a social distance. However, their engagement decreased when their distance becomes closer, around 1.32 meters. Looking into different user activities and engagement, we found that participant engagement was the highest when they were reading the UGC labels, followed by reading information labels, controller interaction with objects, and then gaze on virtual avatar, gaze on objects, and no interaction at all. This also explains why the real-time engagement for the low object interactivity is the highest, because for that object interactivity, participants were only able to read the labels, so that when it's averaged, on average, its real-time engagement index is higher than the medium and high interactivity ones. So to summarize, we found higher levels of spatial presence, engagement, and ecological validity in VR than AR, but the negative effects were also higher. And overall, there were greater engagement in VR than AR. For object interactivity, the total engagement index is greater for objects of higher interactivity, but not their real-time engagement index. The mobile EEG data also showed that engagement is greater when UGC of virtual objects is presented. Users found reading UGC labels more engaging and arousing than reading object information labels. For avatar proximity, users reported the greatest engagement around 3.36 meters, but engagement decreased in the closer proximity around 1 to 2 meters. Our work contributes to the understanding of the factors influencing engagement in hybrid VR and AR environments. It also brings insights into how user engagement in hybrid environments can be supported through the use of virtual object, UGC, and avatar proximity. And it also highlights the needs of objective measures on top of subjective questionnaires, that using a combined psychophysiological and user activity monitoring is a necessary complement to ground-truthing subjective measures of user engagement and interaction in hybrid realities. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch via email, and please feel free to examine more details in our paper.